The autumn wind bit at my face as I pushed through the back door of Rosie's diner, my 12-hour shift finally over. My feet ached in the cheap sneakers I'd bought on clearance last month, already wearing thin at the heels. The alley behind the diner smelled of fryer grease and garbage. Familiar scents after 3 years of working here. "See you tomorrow, Ellie," Marco called from the kitchen, his voice barely audible over the clatter of dishes. I waved without looking back, pulling my thin jacket tighter around me. November in Chicago was unforgiving, and I couldn't afford a new coat until next paycheck, maybe. The tips had been lousy tonight, just $18 for a full shift of forced smiles and "Can I get you anything else, hun?" The streetlights flickered as I turned onto Westfield Avenue, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Most stores were closed at this hour, almost midnight, their windows dark except for the 24-hour pharmacy at the corner. I'd take the bus if I could, but the last one ran at 11:30, and I couldn't afford to leave work early. The 20-minute walk home was just another tax on being poor. I was mentally calculating how much of tomorrow's lunch I could skip to put aside money for winter boots when I saw her, a small figure crumpled on the sidewalk ahead, half hidden between a parked car and a mailbox. At first, I thought it might be a discarded bag of clothes, but then I saw a flash of red, a little red coat with gold buttons, too nice for this neighborhood. "Hey," I called, quickening my pace. "Are you okay?" No response. As I got closer, my stomach dropped. It was a child, a little girl with dark braids, lying motionless on the cold concrete. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, wearing a pristine private school uniform under that expensive coat. "Oh my God!" I rushed to her side, kneeling on the pavement. "Sweetie, can you hear me?" Her skin felt cool to the touch, but she was breathing. I gently turned her onto her back, checking for injuries, but saw none. She'd simply collapsed, it seemed. What was a child this young doing alone on the street at midnight? "Hey, little one," I said, gently tapping her cheek. "Can you wake up?" Her eyelids fluttered slightly, but didn't open. I looked around desperately. The street was deserted. The pharmacy was the only open business, but it was still 3 blocks away. "I need to get you help," I murmured, unsure if she could hear me. That's when I noticed the glint of something in her coat pocket, a phone. I hesitated only briefly before pulling it out. It was the latest model, something I could never afford, with a case decorated with tiny rhinestones. The screen was locked, but I noticed an emergency contact button at the bottom. When I pressed it, only one contact appeared: Papa. No name, just that single word. With trembling fingers, I hit the call button. It rang only once before someone answered. "Isabella?" The voice that came through the speaker was deep and accented. Italian, maybe, but most of all, it radiated quiet authority. Not loud, not aggressive, just commanding. "Isabella, where are you? You were supposed to be home an hour ago." This isn't Isabella," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "My name is Ellie. I found a little girl collapsed on the sidewalk on Westfield Avenue near Rosie's diner. I think this is her father's number?" The silence that followed was so complete that for a moment I thought the call had dropped. Then, "Is she breathing?" The calm in his voice had hardened into something else, something that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Yes, she's breathing, but she's unconscious. I was going to call an ambulance, but no ambulance." The words cut through mine like a blade. "No police. Do not move her. I'm coming. Stay exactly where you are." "But she needs medical—" "I'm bringing a doctor. Do not move. Do not call anyone else." Before I could respond, he spoke again, his voice slightly muffled as if he'd turned away from the phone. "Get the car. Now. And call Dr. Michaels." Then, back to me, with knife-edge precision, exactly where on Westfield? About a block east of Rosie's diner, near the old bookstore, the one that closed down. We're between a blue sedan and a mailbox. 7 minutes, he said. "Keep her warm. If anyone approaches you, call me back immediately." The line went dead. I sat there stunned, the phone still pressed to my ear. What kind of father forbids calling an ambulance for his unconscious child? And the authority in his voice. My mind flashed to those crime documentaries my roommate Jen was always watching. about men who spoke softly and carried big guns. But I didn't have much choice. The little girl, Isabella he'd called her, was still unconscious, her breathing shallow. I took off my jacket and laid it over her, though it wasn't much warmer than the night air. As I did, I noticed a thin gold bracelet around her wrist, engraved with her name and what looked like a family crest. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. I kept one hand on Isabella's wrist, monitoring her pulse while repeatedly checking the time on her phone. What had happened to her? She didn't smell of alcohol, and she seemed too young for drugs. Could it be some medical condition? At exactly 6 minutes and 40 seconds after the call ended, headlights swept around the corner. Not the yellow beams of a normal car, but the bright white glare of expensive LEDs. A black SUV with tinted windows moved down the street with deliberate slowness, like a predator scanning for prey. It pulled up directly in front of us, tires crunching on broken glass. The engine cut off, and the night went silent again. The rear door opened first, and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tailored overcoat that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. But it wasn't his clothes that made my breath catch. It was the sheer presence of him, the way space itself seemed to bend around him, like he carried his own gravity. He moved with controlled precision, his eyes sweeping the street before landing on me with laser focus. They were dark, almost black in the dim light, set in a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so terrifying in its intensity. A scar curved along his right jawline, thin and precise, like it had been placed there deliberately. He wasn't alone. The driver's door opened, and a mountain of a man emerged, scanning our surroundings with practiced efficiency. From the passenger side, a third man appeared, carrying what looked like a medical bag. But I barely registered them. My attention was locked on the man in the overcoat as he approached, his steps silent despite his size. "Isabella," he said, and the name sounded different in his mouth, reverent, almost. He knelt beside us, seemingly unconcerned about his expensive pants touching the dirty sidewalk. Up close, I caught his scent, something subtle and masculine. Sandalwood, maybe, mixed with the metallic tang of what I somehow knew was a gun hidden beneath that perfect coat. I found her like this," I stammered. "She hasn't woken up." His eyes flicked to mine for just a second, and I felt stripped bare, like he'd assessed everything about me in that brief glance. My worn waitress uniform visible beneath my thin shirt, my cheap shoes, the exhaustion etched into my face. "The doctor will examine her," he said, nodding to the man with the bag, who immediately knelt on Isabella's other side. As the doctor worked, the father remained perfectly still, watching his daughter's face with frightening intensity. The scar on his jaw seemed to whiten as he clenched his teeth. "Sir," the doctor said after a moment, "her glucose levels are dangerously low. It's her diabetes. I need to administer—" Before he could finish, the father had already reached into his coat, producing a small case which he handed to the doctor. The medical man worked quickly, preparing an injection that he delivered with practiced efficiency. Almost immediately, color began to return to Isabella's cheeks. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened fully. For a moment, she looked confused. Then her gaze found her father. "Papa," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I forgot to eat after ballet." The transformation on the man's face was astonishing, the hardness melting away, replaced by relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. "Isabella," he said again, gathering her small body against his chest with gentle hands that I suspected were capable of terrible violence. "You scared me, piccola mia." The little girl's arms wrapped around his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. "I wanted to get home on my own, like a big girl. Sophia's mom lets her walk home alone. Sophia's father isn't—" He stopped himself, glancing at me. "We will discuss this later." He stood in one fluid motion, lifting Isabella as if she weighed nothing. That's when his gaze locked with mine again. More deliberate this time, studying me with unsettling thoroughness. "You found my daughter," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. I was walking home from work and—" "Your name is Ellie." "Eleanor, actually. Eleanor Walsh. But everyone calls me Ellie." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You work at the diner." "Yes, for 3 years now." He seemed to be making a decision, weighing something in his mind. Then he reached into his pocket and extended a hand toward me. I flinched instinctively, which made something dangerous flicker across his features. "Your jacket," he said. I looked down, suddenly remembering my thin jacket still lying on the sidewalk where Isabella had been. I picked it up, dusting it off awkwardly. "Thank you for helping my daughter, Eleanor Walsh," he said, her full name rolling off his tongue with precision. "I do not forget such debts. It wasn't, anyone would have. Few would have stopped. Fewer would have stayed." He shifted Isabella in his arms, and her eyes were now closed again, her breathing even. "And you did not call the authorities, as I instructed." The way he said it made it clear that this was significant, that I had passed some test I hadn't known I was taking. "Your car is here," he said abruptly, nodding toward the SUV. "My driver will take you home." "Oh, that's not necessary. I only live a few blocks." It was not an offer. His tone remained pleasant, but the finality in it was unmistakable. Before I could protest further, the large driver had moved beside me, gesturing toward the vehicle with a politeness that somehow felt non-negotiable. As the father turned to carry Isabella to the car, I noticed something I had missed before. The bulge of a shoulder holster visible for just a moment as his coat shifted. My stomach clenched, the absolute command in his voice. The men who moved like shadows, the gun, the luxury, the quiet danger that emanated from him. I suddenly knew exactly what kind of man had just declared himself in my debt. And as I allowed myself to be escorted to the waiting SUV, a terrible certainty settled over me. My life had just irrevocably changed, and I had no idea what that would mean. The SUV's interior smelled of leather and something faintly metallic. I sat rigidly on the edge of the seat, hands clutched around my worn purse as the driver navigated empty streets with practiced efficiency. In the middle row, the father cradled Isabella against his chest, occasionally murmuring something in Italian while the doctor monitored her vitals. No one had asked for my address, yet somehow we were heading directly toward my apartment building, the Parkview Apartments, correct? The driver's voice startled me, the first words anyone had spoken since we'd entered the vehicle. "Yes," I answered, trying to mask my unease. "How did you—" "Third floor, apartment 3C, the father interrupted without looking up from his daughter. "Shared with Jennifer Reyes, waitress at the Golden Crown Casino. Your lease expires in 3 months. A cold wave washed over me. My mouth opened, then closed, no words emerging. "I make it my business to know things, Eleanor Walsh," he continued, finally raising his gaze to mine. In the dim glow of passing streetlights, his eyes looked almost black. Knowledge is survival. The car slowed to a stop in front of my building. A crumbling brick structure with security bars on the first-floor windows and a front door that never quite locked properly. The contrast between my shabby home and the gleaming vehicle couldn't have been more stark. The driver exited and opened my door with the formality of a chauffeur serving royalty. As I stepped out, the father's window lowered. "Tomorrow," he said, "someone will come for you at the diner. 8 o'clock when your shift ends." It wasn't a request. "I have classes on Tuesday mornings," I said, finding my voice. "I'm studying nursing at the community college, and I can't miss. Your professors have been notified that you're assisting with a family emergency. Your absence has been excused for the week." My breath caught. "The week? I don't understand. Why would you—" "Isabella wishes to thank you properly." His expression softened slightly when he mentioned his daughter, but hardened again as he added, "And I still have questions about tonight." The window began to rise. "Wait," I called, stepping forward. "I don't even know your name." The window paused, half closed. "Salvatore," he said after a moment. "Salvatore Russo." Then the glass sealed shut, and the SUV pulled away, leaving me alone on the sidewalk with a name that seemed to carry its own weight in the night air. I barely slept. The name Salvatore Russo tumbled through my mind like a stone in a dryer, keeping me awake until dawn crept through the thin curtains. Around 6, I finally gave up and reached for my laptop, fingers hesitating only briefly before typing his name into the search bar. The results made my blood run cold. Most articles were in Italian, but the English ones told me enough. Salvatore Russo, suspected head of one of Chicago's most powerful remaining crime families. Investigated for everything from racketeering to murder, but never convicted. Witnesses had a habit of recanting or disappearing. His legitimate businesses included shipping, real estate, and a chain of high-end restaurants across the city. And now, somehow, I had caught his attention. I closed my laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes. What had I gotten myself into by simply being kind to a sick child on the street? Rough night? Jen asked, emerging from her bedroom with her casino uniform already on, makeup perfect despite the early hour. You could say that. I hesitated then. Jen, have you ever heard of someone named Salvatore Russo? She froze, coffee mug halfway to her lips. Why are you asking about Sal Russo? The familiarity of Sal wasn't lost on me. You know him? Of him, she corrected quickly. Everybody at the casino knows who he is. He owns half the lakefront properties and has fingers in most of the gambling operations. She set her mug down carefully. Ellie, why are you asking about him? I gave her the short version, finding Isabella, calling her father, discovering who he was. Jesus Christ, she whispered when I finished. And he's sending someone to pick you up tonight? I nodded. Listen to me very carefully. Jen gripped my shoulders, her fake nails digging in slightly. Be respectful. Do exactly as you're told. Don't ask questions. Don't mention anything you might have read about him. Her eyes were wide with genuine fear. These people don't play games, Ellie. You're scaring me, I said, trying to laugh it off. Good, she replied without smiling. You should be scared. My shift at the diner crawled by. Every time the bell over the door jingled, my head snapped up, heart hammering. By 7, my nerves were so frayed that I dropped an entire tray of drinks when a customer's phone rang unexpectedly. You okay, honey? Rosie asked as I mopped up the mess, my hands trembling. You're jumpy as a cat today. Fine, I lied, just didn't sleep well. At exactly 8 o'clock, as I was hanging up my apron, the bell chimed one final time. A different driver from last night entered. Younger, but with the same hyper-vigilant eyes, scanning the room before settling on me. Miss Walsh, he said with a slight nod. The car is waiting. Rosie raised an eyebrow but said nothing as I gathered my things. I followed the driver outside, where a different black SUV idled at the curb. This time there was no little girl inside, no doctor. Just an empty leather seat and my hammering heart. We drove in silence, leaving my familiar neighborhood behind and heading north toward the glittering lakefront. The buildings grew newer, the streets cleaner, until we pulled through a gate into a private drive lined with immaculately trimmed hedges. At the end stood an imposing stone mansion, its windows glowing warmly against the evening darkness. 2 men in dark suits stood at attention by the front entrance. They nodded to the driver as he opened my door, their eyes tracking my movements with professional detachment. This way, Miss Walsh, one said, gesturing toward massive double doors. Inside was a foyer that could have swallowed my entire apartment. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, artwork that looked like it belonged in a museum. I hugged my purse against my side, acutely aware of my waitress uniform and scuffed shoes. Eleanor! The voice was high and sweet. Isabella, hurrying down a grand staircase with a bright smile. She looked transformed from the pale, unconscious child I'd found on the sidewalk. Her dark hair was neatly braided, and she wore what looked like silk pajamas beneath a fluffy robe. You came, she exclaimed, stopping just short of hugging me, suddenly shy. Of course, I said, smiling despite my nerves. How are you feeling? Much better. Dr. Michaels said I was very silly to skip my snack after ballet. She rolled her eyes dramatically. But Papa said you're my guardian angel, so everything worked out okay. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed across the marble, deliberate, measured steps that I somehow already recognized. Salvatore Russo appeared from a hallway to the right, dressed now in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, his sleeves rolled to the elbows revealing powerful forearms and the edge of what looked like a tattoo. In the bright light of the foyer, I could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps mid-30s, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw marred by that precise scar. His hair was dark, cut short on the sides but longer on top. And his eyes, those eyes that had seemed black in the darkness, were actually a deep, penetrating brown. "Isabella," he said, his tone gentle but firm, "what did we discuss about running in the house?" She ducked her head. "Sorry, Papa." He placed a hand on her shoulder, then looked at me. "I see you've met your savior again." "I'm hardly," I began. "Modesty is admirable but unnecessary," he cut me off. "If not for you, my daughter might still be lying on that sidewalk." Something dark flashed across his features. "Or worse." Isabella tugged at his hand. "Can I show her my room, Papa? Please? I want to show her my science project." He checked his watch. A timepiece that probably cost more than my annual salary. 20 minutes, then it's time for bed. His gaze shifted to me, after which, "Miss Walsh and I will talk." The way he said talk sent a shiver down my spine. Isabella led me up the staircase, chattering excitedly about school and her friends, and how her science project on ecosystems had won first prize. I followed, grateful for the reprieve from her father's intensity, but acutely aware of his eyes tracking our ascent. Her bedroom was the size of my entire apartment, decorated in shades of lilac and silver. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with titles well beyond an 8-year-old's typical reading level. A large desk held a computer setup that would make a tech executive jealous. "This is Sophia," she said, pointing to a photo of herself with another girl. "Her mom lets her walk home alone, but Papa says I'm not allowed because of who he is." She frowned slightly. "What does that mean exactly?" "Papa never explains." I chose my words carefully. "I think it means your dad is an important man, and important men sometimes have people who don't like them because of business." She nodded solemnly. "That's what he says too, but he never talks about his business." She showed me her science project, an impressively detailed model of a rainforest ecosystem, and I made appropriate noises of admiration while trying to reconcile this normal, bright child with the dangerous world she inhabited. Exactly 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. A woman in what appeared to be a nurse's uniform entered. "Time for bed, Miss Isabella," she said with a slight accent. Eastern European, maybe. "But Sophia," your father was very clear. The woman's tone was kind but firm. "And you need your rest after yesterday's episode." Isabella sighed dramatically but didn't argue further. She turned to me with a smile that transformed her face. "Thank you for finding me, Eleanor. Papa says we're in your debt forever now." The word forever hung in the air like a weight as the nurse ushered me back to the hallway. A different security man waited there, gesturing for me to follow him back downstairs and through a series of corridors. We stopped before a heavy wooden door. The man knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. "Miss Walsh, sir," he announced, then stepped aside for me to enter. The room was a study, lined with books and dominated by a massive desk. Behind it stood Salvatore, pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the rich wood paneling. "Sit," he said, nodding toward a leather chair positioned before the desk. I perched on the edge, hands folded in my lap to keep them from trembling. He placed one of the glasses in front of me, then circled the desk to lean against its front, looming over me with the casual confidence of a man accustomed to intimidating others. "You seem nervous, Eleanor," he observed, swirling the liquid in his glass. "Why?" "I think you know why," I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. A faint smile touched his lips. "Because you've been researching me." It wasn't a question. I didn't deny it. "Let me save you further Google searches," he said, taking a sip of his drink. "Yes, I am who they say I am. Yes, I do what they say I do. And yes, by helping Isabella, you have entangled yourself with a man most people actively avoid." My mouth went dry. I didn't help her to gain anything. "Which is precisely why this debt weighs so heavily." He set his glass down and leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something, Eleanor Walsh. What does a woman with your intelligence do working in a diner and living in that neighborhood?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm putting myself through nursing school. The diner has flexible hours and the apartment is what I can afford." "Laudable," he said, studying me. "And your parents?" "My mother died when I was 14. Cancer. My father wasn't in the picture." Something shifted in his expression. A brief softening. So you've been on your own since then? I nodded. As was I, he said quietly, more to himself than to me. Then more directly, I have a proposition for you, Eleanor. My pulse jumped. Mr. Russo, Salvatore, he corrected. Or Sal, if you prefer. Salvatore, I repeated, the name feeling strange in my mouth. Whatever you're thinking, I'm not. Isabella needs a companion, he interrupted. Someone to monitor her health, ensure she takes her medications, follows her diet. The school nurse does this during class hours, but there are gaps in coverage. After school, evenings when I'm working. I blinked. You want me to be her babysitter? His expression hardened. I want you to be her medical monitor. You're studying nursing. This position would pay 4 times what you make at that diner, plus room and board here in the house. My mind reeled. I couldn't possibly live here. My classes, my roommate. Your classes can be attended from here. We're 10 minutes from your campus. As for your roommate, he shrugged. Her rent will be covered until she finds a new arrangement. The casual way he dismissed my entire life made anger flare beneath my fear. You can't just rearrange my existence because I happen to help your daughter. I can, he said simply. And I am. Why me? You could hire an actual nurse because Isabella trusts you. He picked up his glass again, studying me over the rim. And because I saw how you looked at her last night, not as the daughter of Salvatore Russo, but as a child who needed help. That is uncommon in my world. I swallowed hard. And if I refuse, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. I would be disappointed. He let that hang in the air for a moment. But I would not force you. Contrary to what you may have read, I do not make habits of coercion. Somehow, I doubted that very much. However, he continued, before you refuse, consider this. The position comes with full coverage of your remaining tuition and guaranteed placement at Northwestern Memorial after graduation. His eyes held mine. I believe that was your goal, yes? The position you've been applying for without success. My breath caught. How could he possibly know that? Knowledge is survival, he repeated his words from last night. I stared at the untouched drink before me, mind racing. The offer was impossible, outrageous, and yet the solution to every financial problem that had kept me awake at night for years. Complete my degree debt-free, secure the job I'd dreamed of, all while earning more money than I'd ever had. All I had to do was move into the home of a man who terrified me. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. He straightened, moving back behind his desk. You have until tomorrow evening. One of my drivers will collect you after your shift. I rose on unsteady legs, sensing the dismissal. One more thing, Eleanor, he said, as I reached the door. When I turned, his expression was deadly serious. While you consider my offer, remember this. If you accept, you will be under my protection. If you refuse, we will never speak again, and you will go back to your life as it was. His eyes locked with mine, and in them I saw something beyond the danger and the power, something almost vulnerable. But know this, he added softly. Once you enter my world, there is no easy way out, so choose carefully. As the driver took me home through the glittering Chicago night, those words echoed in my mind. I was standing at a crossroads, and whatever I chose would irrevocably alter the course of my life. The question was, which path led to freedom, and which to a gilded cage? Dawn found me still awake, curled on our threadbare couch with a cold cup of coffee clutched in my hands. I'd spent the night making lists, pros and cons of Salvatore's offer, rational reasons to accept or refuse. But rationality seemed inadequate when weighing a decision that felt more like stepping off a cliff than choosing a job. You're seriously considering this? Jen stood in the kitchen doorway, hair disheveled from sleep, eyes wide with disbelief after I'd explained Salvatore's proposition. The money alone would change everything, I said. No more double shifts, no more choosing between textbooks and groceries. And a guaranteed position at Northwestern after graduation? Do you know how many people fight for those spots? And all you have to do is move in with Chicago's most dangerous crime lord. Jen's voice dripped sarcasm. Totally worth it. He's not. I stopped myself. We both knew that was exactly what he was. Ellie. Jen sat beside me, taking my hands in hers. These people don't just let you walk away when you're done. Once you're in their world, you know things, see things. You become a liability. He said I'd be under his protection. And that doesn't scare you even more? What happens if that protection ever gets withdrawn? I had no answer for that. Jen sighed, squeezing my hands. Look, I get it. It's a golden ticket. But there's always a price tag, and with guys like Russo, that price might be more than you're prepared to pay. Her words followed me to the diner, hovering like a shadow as I mechanically filled coffee cups and took orders. Rosie noticed my distraction, sending concerned glances whenever I stared too long at nothing or jumped at sudden noises. "Whatever's eating you, honey, it can't be that bad," she said during my break, sliding a plate of pie across the table. "Talk to old Rosie." I managed to smile. "Just a big decision to make. About that man who picked you up yesterday." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't think I didn't notice that fancy car, or the way you turned white as a ghost when he walked in." "It's complicated," I hedged. "Complicated usually means trouble," she said, patting my hand. "And trouble in nice clothes is still trouble." As my shift wound down, the knot in my stomach tightened. Every time the door opened, I expected to see Salvatore's driver. When my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number at 7:45, I nearly dropped it. "Car will arrive at 8:15. Your decision is expected. 15 minutes later than yesterday." Was he giving me extra time or simply busy? Either way, the small reprieve did nothing to settle my racing thoughts. At 8:10, I hung up my apron and gathered my things. Rosie watched me with concern. "Whatever you're getting yourself into, Ellie, be careful," she said. "Some ships aren't meant to be boarded, if you catch my drift." I hugged her impulsively. "I'll be okay, Rosie." "You better be," she replied gruffly. "Still need you on the breakfast shift Monday." Outside, the air had turned colder, threatening rain. I paced the sidewalk, still undecided, heart pounding as the minutes ticked by. A black SUV appeared at precisely 8:15, gliding to a stop before me. The window lowered, revealing not a driver, but Salvatore himself behind the wheel. No security visible, just him. An intimacy that felt more unsettling than a cadre of armed men. "Get in," he said, unlocking the passenger door. I hesitated only briefly before complying. The interior smelled of his cologne, subtle and expensive. "I thought you'd send a driver," I said, buckling my seatbelt. "Some conversations require privacy." He pulled away from the curb with smooth precision. "Have you decided?" I looked at my hands, at the small burn on my wrist from a splash of hot coffee this morning, at the chipped polish on my nails that I never had time to fix properly. Symbols of a life lived on the edge of constant exhaustion. "Before I answer," I said carefully, "I need to understand what I'd be walking into. Not just the job, but your world." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What specifically concerns you?" "Violence," I said bluntly. "Illegal activities. Things I might witness that would make me complicit." He drove in silence for a moment, turning down Lakeshore Drive where the dark water reflected the city lights. "My home is separate from my business, Eleanor. What happens in one does not spill into the other. But Isabella will never be exposed to certain realities," he continued, cutting me off. "And by extension, neither would you. Your duties would be limited to her care and companionship." I wasn't convinced. "And the men with guns? The doctors who make house calls in the middle of the night and don't report diabetic emergencies? Those realities are already in your home." A muscle flexed in his jaw. "Security is necessary. As for Dr. Michaels, he is Isabella's private physician. There are aspects of my life that require discretion." "That's exactly what worries me." He pulled the car to the side of the road suddenly, cutting the engine. When he turned to face me, his expression was deadly serious. "Let me be absolutely clear, Eleanor. I will never ask you to participate in, witness, or conceal anything illegal as part of your duties with Isabella. Your position would be legitimate in every sense, with proper taxation, benefits, and documentation. What I do outside my home is my concern, not yours." His intensity should have frightened me, but instead, I found myself believing him. not because I trusted him, but because I sensed protecting Isabella from his world was perhaps the one principle he held sacred. "And when I finish my degree?" I asked. "You leave with a letter of recommendation and connections that will open any door in Chicago's medical community." His expression softened slightly. "And Isabella will have had the benefit of your care during an important period of her development." I took a deep breath. "I have conditions." Something like surprise flickered in his eyes, quickly replaced by amusement. "Do you?" "Yes. First, I need 1 day off each week to maintain my own life. See friends, go to my apartment, just exist outside your world. Second, I need a written contract spelling out exactly what you just promised. And third," I hesitated, then forged ahead, "if I ever feel unsafe, I can leave immediately. No questions asked. No consequences." He studied me for a long moment. "Your first 2 conditions are reasonable. Your third," his voice hardened, "shows you still don't understand what it means to have my protection. If you ever felt unsafe in my home, the threat would be eliminated, not you." A chill ran down my spine at the casual way he spoke of eliminating threats, but there was something else in his words. A fierce protectiveness that extended beyond his daughter to anyone under his care. "So?" he prompted. "Your decision?" I closed my eyes briefly, then met his gaze directly. "I accept." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. "Good." He started the car again, merging smoothly back onto Lakeshore Drive. We drove in silence for several minutes before I realized we weren't heading toward his mansion or my apartment. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To settle your affairs," he replied. "I assume you'll need to pack belongings, inform your roommate, resign from the diner." "Tonight?" I stammered. "But you begin tomorrow," he said, as if this were perfectly reasonable. "Isabella has ballet from 9 to 11. You'll accompany her, monitoring her glucose levels throughout. I've had a packet prepared with her medical history, treatment protocols, and emergency contacts." The methodical efficiency of it all left me speechless. He'd been so confident I'd accept that he'd already planned my first day. "I haven't even given notice at the diner," I protested. "Already handled." "Rosie received an offer this afternoon to cover your remaining shifts at triple the usual rate, plus a consulting fee for menu development at one of my restaurants." He glanced at me. She agreed quite readily. Indignation flared. "You had no right to. Would you prefer to work your 2-week notice while also caring for Isabella?" he asked calmly. I merely expedited an inevitable transition. Put that way, it made practical sense. But the high-handed manner still rankled. "And what about my classes? My teaching assistants won't just accept that I'm suddenly doing everything remotely. Your professors have been informed that you've received a prestigious private nursing position that includes educational accommodation." He changed lanes effortlessly. "Northwestern Medical is very supportive of the arrangement, especially after my recent donation to their pediatric research department." I stared at him, a mixture of awe and horror washing over me. "Is there anything you can't simply arrange to your liking?" His expression darkened momentarily. "Many things, Eleanor. Far more than you might imagine." We pulled up to my apartment building, but instead of stopping, he drove into the small parking lot behind it, a space usually reserved for residents who could afford the extra fee. "I'll come up with you," he said, killing the engine. "That's not necessary," I replied quickly. The thought of Salvatore Russo in my tiny, shabby apartment made my stomach clench with embarrassment. "It is," he countered. "We need to discuss logistics, and I prefer not to do so in a vehicle." Before I could protest further, he was out of the car and opening my door. I led him reluctantly into the building, hyper-aware of his presence behind me as we climbed the 3 flights of stairs. The elevator had been temporarily out of service for the past 8 months. Jen was home, sprawled on the couch watching reality TV. She looked up as we entered, her expression morphing from casual interest to shock when she saw Salvatore. "Holy shit," she whispered, scrambling to her feet. Hello, sir." The "sir" made Salvatore's mouth twitch slightly. "Miss Reyes," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "I understand you work at the Golden Crown." "Yes, sir." she replied, shooting me a wide-eyed look. 5 years now. Victor Mendez speaks highly of your skills at the blackjack table. Jen blinked rapidly. Victor was the casino manager, 3 levels above her direct supervisor. Thank you, sir. Eleanor will be coming to work for me, Salvatore continued smoothly, which leaves you in need of a new roommate or a new living arrangement. Jen swallowed visibly. I've been thinking about moving closer to the casino anyway. Excellent. I've taken the liberty of arranging viewings for 3 apartments tomorrow. All within your budget, all with improved security. He produced a card from his pocket, handing it to her. My assistant will contact you with details. Jen took the card with slightly trembling fingers. That's very thoughtful. He nodded, then turned to me. You should pack what you'll need immediately. The rest can be moved tomorrow. I found my voice at last. You can't just reorganize our lives like this. Jen might not want to move, and I might need more than an hour to pack up my entire existence. Something dangerous flashed in Salvatore's eyes, the first real glimpse I'd had of the man beneath the polished exterior. Time is a luxury I rarely waste, Eleanor. Efficiency is not tyranny. It kind of is when you don't give people choices, I countered. Jen made a small choking sound, her eyes darting between us in horror. To my surprise, Salvatore's expression softened into something almost like respect. Very well. Miss Reyes, do you object to the apartment viewings tomorrow? You're welcome to decline. Jen shook her head quickly. No objections. Thank you for the opportunity. And you? He turned back to me. How much time would you prefer for packing? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected anger, not accommodation. The weekend would be helpful. I have things to sort through, arrangements to make. You may have until Sunday evening, he conceded. However, you begin work tomorrow as planned. A driver will collect you at 8 a.m. It was a compromise, if a minimal one. I nodded my agreement. Good, he said, checking his watch. I'll wait while you pack what you need for the next few days. I retreated to my bedroom, closing the door behind me with relief. My hands shook as I pulled clothes from drawers, toiletries from my bathroom caddy, textbooks from my desk. Through the thin walls, I could hear the low murmur of Salvatore's voice, then Jen's higher, nervous responses. What had I gotten myself into? 20 minutes later, I emerged with a duffel bag and backpack. Jen sat alone on the couch, looking shell-shocked. He went to take a call, she said, nodding toward the hallway. Ellie, that man is... She trailed off, seemingly unable to find adequate words. I know, I replied. Are you really okay with all this? Are you kidding? She leaned forward, lowering her voice. The apartments he's having me look at are in Riverfront. I could never afford that neighborhood on my own, but apparently the subsidized rate he's arranged is less than what I pay for this dump. That doesn't bother you? Being managed like this? Jen shrugged. I've seen how guys like him operate at the casino. They like control, and they're willing to pay for it. She gave me an appraising look. Just be careful you know what you're really being paid for. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Salvatore returned. His expression was thunderous. All trace of the earlier compromise gone. We need to go, he said curtly. Now. I grabbed my bags, shooting Jen a quick goodbye hug. I'll call you tomorrow, I promised. She nodded, her eyes conveying what her words couldn't. Be careful. Salvatore's hand settled at the small of my back as he guided me down the stairs, the touch light, but unmistakably possessive. In the car, he remained silent, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Is everything okay? I ventured after several minutes. No, he replied tersely. Then, with visible effort, he softened his tone. But it doesn't concern you. We drove not to his mansion, but to a high-rise overlooking the lake, a sleek glass tower with a uniformed doorman who hurried to open my door. My city residence, Salvatore explained, as we entered a private elevator requiring both a key card and fingerprint recognition. Isabella is already here. We'll return to the main house tomorrow. The elevator opened directly into a stunning penthouse apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a breathtaking view of the lake and city skyline. The decor was minimalist, but luxurious. Everything in shades of white, gray, and black. A woman I recognized as Isabella's nurse appeared from a hallway. "She's asleep, Mr. Russo." The excitement of coming to the city apartment tired her out. Salvatore nodded. "Thank you, Sophia. You're dismissed for the evening." After she left, he turned to me. "I'll show you to your room. Tomorrow we'll discuss your duties in detail." He led me down a hallway to a guest suite larger than my entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, with an ensuite bathroom featuring a shower big enough for 4 people and a soaking tub beside yet another window with that spectacular view. "Everything you need should be here," he said, gesturing to the bathroom. "If not, use the house phone to request it." I set my bags down awkwardly. "Thank you." He remained in the doorway, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You should know something, Eleanor. I don't usually allow people into my private residences. Few have seen this apartment who don't work directly for me." "Why me, then?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "Why go to all this trouble for someone who just happened to find your daughter on the street?" He was silent for a long moment. "Because you did what no one else would have done. In a neighborhood where people mind their own business to survive, you stopped to help a child you didn't know. That kind of integrity is rare in my world." Before I could respond, he added, "And because Isabella hasn't stopped talking about her guardian angel since she woke up, my daughter's happiness is everything to me." There was such naked truth in that last statement that I found myself believing him completely, perhaps for the first time. "Get some rest," he said, his usual commanding tone returning. "Tomorrow will be a full day." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "What happened? On your phone call earlier?" He paused, his back to me. "Someone made a miscalculation," he said finally. "It's being corrected." The ominous phrasing sent a chill through me. "Is Isabella in danger? Is that why we came here instead of the house?" He turned back, his expression unreadable. "My daughter is always potentially in danger, Eleanor. It's the price of being mine." His eyes held mine. "As you may discover yourself." With that cryptic statement, he left, closing the door behind him. I sat on the edge of the enormous bed, the events of the day crashing over me like waves. Less than 48 hours ago, I'd been a waitress worrying about making rent. Now I was in the penthouse of one of Chicago's most feared men, hired to care for his daughter, drawn into his orbit by a simple act of kindness that had somehow upended my entire existence. As I stared out at the glittering city below, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was now caught in a current far stronger than I could swim against, being pulled deeper into waters where predators lurked just beneath the glittering surface. And Salvatore Russo, with his dark eyes and dangerous presence, was the most formidable predator of all. I woke disoriented, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows I didn't recognize. For a moment, panic gripped me before memories of the previous night flooded back. Salvatore, the penthouse, my new life. The digital clock on the nightstand read 6:47. I'd slept deeply despite my anxiety, the luxurious mattress enveloping me like a cloud. I showered quickly in the enormous bathroom, marveling at the array of expensive toiletries lined up for my use, then faced the dilemma of what to wear. My waitress clothes seemed woefully inappropriate, but I hadn't packed much else. A soft knock interrupted my deliberation. "Yes?" I called, clutching my towel tighter. "Good morning, Miss Walsh." A woman's voice, not Sophia's. "Mr. Russo asked me to bring you suitable attire for today's activities." I opened the door to find a petite woman in a crisp black suit, holding several garment bags. She stepped past me efficiently, hanging them in the closet. "I'm Natalia, Mr. Russo's personal assistant," she said, assessing me with a cool gaze. "I've brought options based on your measurements. The blue would be appropriate for today's ballet outing." "My measurements?" I echoed. "How did you—" "Mr. Russo is thorough," she replied, as if this explained everything. "Breakfast will be served in 20 minutes. Isabella is looking forward to seeing you." With that, she departed, leaving me staring at the garment bags. Inside the one she'd indicated, I found a simple but elegant blue dress that probably cost more than a month's rent, along with a coordinating cardigan and flats. More disturbing was how perfectly everything fit, as if I'd been measured in my sleep. The main living area was even more impressive in daylight. One entire wall was glass, showcasing Lake Michigan stretching to the horizon. At a round table by the windows, Isabella sat in animated conversation with her father, who was reading something on a tablet while nodding at her chatter. "Eleanor." Isabella spotted me first, her face lighting up. "Papa said you're coming to ballet with me today. Do you dance too?" "Not ballet," I admitted, smiling at her enthusiasm. "I'm not very graceful. I can teach you. Miss Lavina says I'm the best in my class, even though I'm the youngest." Salvatore looked up, his eyes sweeping over me in a quick, assessing glance. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, though his tie was loosened, and the top button of his shirt undone, a small concession to the early hour. "The dress suits you," he said, setting down his tablet. "Sit, eat." It wasn't an invitation, but a command. I took the empty seat, hyper-aware of his presence across the table. A housekeeper I hadn't met appeared silently, setting a plate before me, some kind of egg white omelet with vegetables, and a side of fresh fruit. "Isabella has been explaining her ballet routine," Salvatore continued, his attention split between me and whatever he was reading on his tablet. "You'll need to ensure she eats precisely 1 hour before class, then check her glucose levels immediately before and after." "I made a chart," Isabella said proudly, sliding a paper toward me. It was covered in colorful drawings of food with numbers beside them. "These are the snacks I can have and how many carbs they have. Papa says you need to know because you're my new medical person." I studied the chart, impressed by her understanding of her condition at such a young age. "This is very helpful. Thank you, Isabella." "You can call me Izzy," she said, then glanced at her father. "But only when Papa's not around. He doesn't like nicknames." Salvatore's mouth twitched. "Eat your breakfast, Isabella." She dutifully returned to her food, but not before giving me a conspiratorial wink that warmed something inside me. The omelet was delicious, prepared with ingredients I probably couldn't name. I ate quietly, listening to Isabella's cheerful monologue about her ballet friends and the upcoming recital. Salvatore occasionally asked a question or murmured a response, but mostly seemed absorbed in whatever he was reading. "Dr. Michaels will meet you at the ballet studio," he said abruptly, looking up at me. "He'll review Isabella's medical protocols and answer any questions. Sophia will accompany you as well, but her role is primarily security, not medical." "Security?" I echoed, pausing with my fork halfway to my mouth. "Yes." His tone left no room for further questions on that topic. "After ballet, you'll return here. Isabella has tutoring this afternoon while you and I discuss the details of your position." Can't Eleanor come to my math lesson?" Isabella asked, pushing her empty plate away. "Mr. Peterson is so boring." "Your education is not meant to entertain you," Salvatore replied, though his tone was gentle, "and Eleanor and I have business to discuss." Isabella sighed dramatically, but didn't argue further. A child accustomed to her father's decisions being final, Salvatore checked his watch and stood. "I have meetings this morning. Natalia will give you both phones before you leave. Secure devices with appropriate contacts programmed in." He rested his hand briefly on Isabella's head, a gesture of surprising tenderness. "Behave for Miss Lavina today." "I will, Papa." He turned to me, his expression hardening back to the controlled mask I was beginning to recognize as his public face. "My driver will take you. Stay with Sophia and Isabella at all times. If anything seems unusual, anyone watching too closely, approaching without reason, any situation that makes you uncomfortable, alert Sophia immediately." The gravity of his tone sent a chill through me. Is there something specific I should be worried about? His jaw tightened. Just standard precautions, but I didn't believe him. Something had changed since last night. The same thing that had caused our sudden relocation to this penthouse instead of the mansion. He moved toward the elevator, then paused, turning back. "One more thing, Eleanor. The dress you're wearing cost $4,000. Try not to get it dirty." My jaw dropped as he disappeared into the elevator. $4,000 for a simple blue dress? I could have paid almost 4 months' rent with that money. Papa likes to buy pretty things, Isabella observed, watching my expression with amusement. He got me 7 pairs of ballet shoes last month, and Miss Lavina said I only needed 1. The ballet studio occupied the top floor of a renovated warehouse in an upscale neighborhood. The driver, a stone-faced man who'd been introduced only as Anton, escorted us from the car to the entrance with the vigilance of a Secret Service agent, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. Sophia, who I'd now been formally introduced to, walked directly beside Isabella, her hand resting casually near her purse, where, I strongly suspected, she carried a weapon. Despite her nurse's scrubs and gentle demeanor with Isabella, everything about her movements screamed security professional. Inside, the studio was a beautiful space of gleaming hardwood floors and mirrored walls. About a dozen girls Isabella's age were already stretching at the bar under the watchful eye of a severe-looking woman I assumed was Miss Lavina. "Isabella," the instructor called, her Russian accent pronounced. "You are almost late. Quickly now." Isabella scampered off to join her classmates after a quick hug around my waist. I stood awkwardly with Sophia at the back of the room, where several other caretakers, nannies, mothers, and one father, sat watching. "Dr. Michaels will be here shortly," Sophia murmured, guiding me to empty chairs in the corner. We sit here, with the wall at our backs and clear sightlines to all entrances. The tactical consideration in her seating choice confirmed my suspicions about her real role. "You're not actually a nurse, are you?" Her lips curved in a slight smile. "I have medical training, but no, nursing is not my primary profession. You're her bodyguard. One of several," she corrected. "The only female one, which is why I have the most direct contact." I watched Isabella execute a perfect plie, her small face serious with concentration. Is she in real danger, or is Salvatore just paranoid? Sophia's expression hardened. Mr. Russo has many enemies. Isabella is his only vulnerable point, and they know it. She studied me with new intensity. As will you be if you're seen as important to him. Before I could process that disturbing statement, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered the studio, nodding to Sophia before taking the seat beside me. "Miss Walsh," he said, extending his hand. "Dr. Edward Michaels. We met briefly the night you found Isabella, though you may not remember in the chaos." "I remember," I said, shaking his hand. He'd been the one to administer the glucose injection that had revived Isabella. "I understand you're studying nursing," he continued, opening a leather portfolio. "That gives us a helpful foundation. Isabella has type 1 diabetes, diagnosed at age 4. Her condition is generally well controlled, but she's at a challenging age. Active, sometimes forgetful about monitoring, and prone to growth spurts that can affect her insulin needs." For the next half hour, he walked me through Isabella's specific medical history, treatment protocols, and warning signs of complications. It was comprehensive and professional, exactly what any good pediatric endocrinologist would provide for a patient's caregiver. "Mr. Russo mentioned you're affiliated with Northwestern," I said when he'd finished. "Yes, I head the pediatric endocrinology department." He closed his portfolio. "Though my work with Isabella is private, off the books," I clarified. He met my gaze directly. "Miss Walsh, I've treated Isabella since her diagnosis. Mr. Russo values discretion, yes, but my primary concern is my patient's well-being. I maintain all proper medical records. They're simply not entered into systems that could be accessed by those who might wish the family harm." The explanation made clinical sense. Yet the underlying reality, that Isabella's medical care had to be handled like a state secret, underscored just how dangerous her father's world truly was. After ballet class ended, Isabella bounced over, face flushed with exertion. "Did you see my arabesque, Eleanor? Miss Lavina said it was perfect. It was beautiful," I assured her, helping her change shoes. "How are you feeling? Any dizziness or weakness?" She shook her head. "I'm hungry, though." "Let's check your levels first," I said, pulling out the glucose monitor Dr. Michaels had given me. Isabella held out her finger with practiced patience, barely flinching at the small prick. The reading showed her slightly below normal range, not dangerous yet, but heading there. "Time for a snack," I announced, reaching for the small cooler Sophia had brought. Inside were carefully portioned options, each with its carbohydrate count labeled. "I want the apple and peanut butter," Isabella decided. As she ate, I noticed Sophia and Anton in quiet conversation by the door, their expressions tense. Dr. Michaels had also moved closer to Isabella, his casual demeanor belied by the alertness in his eyes. "Is something wrong?" I asked Sophia when she returned. "Change of plans," she said calmly, though I detected an undercurrent of tension. "We're going directly to the main house, not back to the penthouse." "Why?" I watched Isabella chatting happily with Dr. Michaels, oblivious to the sudden shift in atmosphere. Sophia's voice dropped. "Mr. Russo's orders. The car is waiting." The return journey felt different. Anton took a circuitous route, frequently checking his mirrors. A second vehicle, a black sedan I hadn't noticed before, followed at a distance. Sophia kept Isabella engaged with a game on her tablet, but her eyes constantly scanned the traffic around us. When we finally arrived at Salvatore's mansion, the gates opened immediately for our approach and closed just as quickly behind us. 2 security men I recognized from my previous visit stood at attention at the front entrance. "Papa!" Isabella called, running toward Salvatore as he emerged from the house. He caught her in a tight embrace, lifting her off her feet. "How was ballet, piccola mia?" he asked, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Amazing. Eleanor watched the whole time, and she said my arabesque was beautiful." His eyes met mine over Isabella's head. "Did she?" I nodded, feeling oddly like I'd passed some kind of test. "Isabella, go with Sophia to wash up for lunch," he instructed, setting his daughter down. "Eleanor and I need to talk." Once Isabella had disappeared inside, Salvatore's expression transformed, the tender father vanishing, replaced by the hard-eyed man I'd glimpsed the night before, in my study. He said curtly, leading the way through the mansion's opulent interior. His study here was larger than the one at the penthouse, lined with leather-bound books and dominated by an antique desk that looked like it belonged in a museum. A fire crackled in a massive stone fireplace despite the mild day outside. "Sit," he instructed, closing the door behind us. I perched on one of 2 leather chairs facing his desk. "What's going on?" Sophia said there was a change of plans and the security seemed heightened. He remained standing, pacing slightly. "There was an incident last night, nothing that directly threatens Isabella, but a precaution nonetheless." "What kind of incident?" I pressed. His jaw tightened. "The kind that doesn't concern you." "It does if it affects Isabella's safety," I countered. "Or mine." He stopped pacing, fixing me with a penetrating stare. "You're right," he said after a moment, surprising me. "You've entangled yourself with my family, so you deserve certain truths." He moved to a cabinet, withdrawing a crystal decanter. "Drink?" I shook my head. He poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid, swirling it thoughtfully. "A business associate attempted to renegotiate terms yesterday by leveraging information about my movements. This associate has been reminded of the importance of loyalty." His eyes met mine. The reminder was not gentle. A chill ran down my spine at the implication. "And that's why we moved from the penthouse to here? In case this person knew where you lived?" "The penthouse isn't a secret," he replied. "This property, however, has certain advantages in terms of security. We're on 10 acres, with a perimeter monitored by both human and electronic means. No one approaches without my knowledge." I swallowed hard. Is this normal? Moving houses because of threats? "No," he admitted, "but I'm being cautious. Isabella has grown attached to you already, and I won't risk either of you." The casual inclusion of me in his protection both warmed and terrified me. "Salvatore," I began carefully, "I agreed to care for Isabella's health, not to be caught in the middle of whatever this is. There is no middle ground in my world, Eleanor," he said, his voice hardening. "You're either under my protection or you're not. There is no halfway." The full weight of my decision crashed over me anew. I'd stepped into his orbit, and the gravity was far stronger than I'd imagined. "Now," he said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. "To the matter of your employment." He opened a drawer, withdrawing a folder. "Your contract, as requested. Salary, benefits, confidentiality clauses, all clearly outlined." I took the document with trembling fingers. The salary figure made me blink twice to confirm I wasn't hallucinating. It was more than 5 times what I'd made at the diner. "This is excessive," I murmured. "It's appropriate compensation for the position and its unique requirements." He leaned against the desk, watching me scan the pages. "Your tuition will be paid directly to the university. A car will be available for your use when needed. Your 1 day off per week is included, as stipulated." The thoroughness was impressive, the terms more generous than I could have imagined. Yet as I flipped through the detailed document, I couldn't help feeling like I was signing away more than just my time. "One thing isn't addressed," I said, looking up at him. "You mentioned yesterday that if I ever felt unsafe, the threat would be eliminated. What exactly does that mean?" His expression remained impassive. "It means exactly what I said. Anyone who threatens someone under my protection faces consequences." "I don't want anyone hurt because of me," I insisted. "Then we're aligned in our interests," he replied smoothly. "Because I don't want you hurt at all." The intensity in his gaze made heat rise to my cheeks. I looked back at the contract, trying to focus. "The clothing," I said suddenly. "This morning, Natalia mentioned you had my measurements. And this dress." I gestured to the blue dress I still wore. $4,000 is excessive for work attire. A hint of amusement touched his features. "Isabella's previous caretakers dressed accordingly. Your appearance reflects on my family." "But how did you get my measurements overnight?" "I have resources," he said simply. "Is the fit not to your liking?" "That's not the point," I said, flustered. "It feels invasive." He considered this, head tilted slightly. "I don't view efficiency as invasion, Eleanor. But I understand your perspective. In the future, Natalia will consult you before ordering anything." "Would that be acceptable?" The concession, small as it was, surprised me. I nodded. "Good," he said, straightening. "Sign the contract, and we'll consider the matter settled." I hesitated, pen hovering over the signature line. "And if I change my mind later? If this becomes too much?" His expression darkened. "Do you intend to abandon Isabella after she's grown attached to you?" "No, of course not. But this world, your world, it's more complicated than I realized." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. "Few things worth having come without complications, Eleanor." Something in his tone made me look up, catching an expression in his eyes I couldn't quite decipher. Something beyond the cool authority he typically projected. For a moment, I glimpsed vulnerability beneath the power. A man accustomed to controlling everything except, perhaps, his own heart, where his daughter was concerned. And now, possibly, where I was concerned too. The realization sent a jolt through me. I signed quickly, before I could second-guess myself further. "Excellent," he said, taking the contract and returning it to his desk. "Now, there's the matter of your living arrangements. Your room here is adjacent to Isabella's suite. Sophia stays in the connected room on her other side when on duty. My things are being collected from your apartment this afternoon," he finished for me. "I've assigned personnel to pack and transport everything. They'll be respectful of your privacy." The thought of strangers handling my possessions made me uncomfortable. But I'd already surrendered so much control that this seemed a minor point to argue. "Isabella has tutoring until 3, he continued. "I suggest you use that time to familiarize yourself with the house, particularly the security protocols. Carlos." He nodded toward the door, where I presumed a security man waited outside. "We'll show you the grounds and explain the systems you need to understand." It all felt overwhelming. The contract, the house, the implicit dangers lurking at the periphery of this new life I'd chosen. "Any questions?" he asked, watching me closely. "Just one," I said, finding my voice. "The man who tried to leverage information about you. What happened to him?" Something cold flickered in Salvatore's eyes. "He's reconsidering his poor choices from a hospital bed." He stepped closer, until I could smell his cologne, that same subtle, expensive scent I'd noticed in his car. "I protect what's mine, Eleanor. Remember that." The possessive phrasing sent a shiver down my spine, not entirely from fear. "Isabella is waiting for lunch," he said, abruptly shifting back to the practical. "After your tour of the grounds, join her in the sunroom. She's excited to show you her science projects." As I followed him from the study, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a gilded mirror. the expensive blue dress, my hair neatly arranged, looking every bit the polished professional I'd never had the means to become. But beneath that veneer, I saw the truth in my own eyes. I was in deeper than I'd ever intended, drawn into Salvatore Russo's orbit by forces I didn't fully understand. And somewhere between fear and fascination, I was beginning to lose sight of where his world ended and my own began. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of new routines. Each morning began with checking Isabella's glucose levels, then breakfast in the sunlit kitchen, often just the two of us, as Salvatore frequently left before dawn for business. Afternoons were filled with Isabella's various activities: ballet 3 times a week, piano lessons, tutoring, and the occasional playdate with carefully vetted friends. I'd settled into a rhythm, learning the complex dance of living in Salvatore's world. The mansion staff, a mix of household employees and thinly disguised security personnel, had accepted my presence with professional courtesy, if not warmth. Sophia had become something of an ally, teaching me the unwritten rules of the household and occasionally sharing small insights into Salvatore's complex personality. "He trusts you with Isabella," she'd told me one evening as we watched the little girl practice piano. "That's rare." The last tutor lasted 3 days before he decided she watched his daughter too closely, like she was memorizing details for someone else. The constant undercurrent of paranoia should have been suffocating, yet somehow it had become normalized. Checking rooms before entering them, never answering the door myself, reporting any unusual cars or people near the property. The mansion itself was a fortress disguised as a luxury home, with security features I was only beginning to understand. As for Salvatore himself, he remained an enigma, sometimes absent for days, other times appearing unexpectedly to join Isabella and me for dinner or an evening movie. Around his daughter, he was attentive and surprisingly gentle. Around me, he maintained a careful distance, our interactions limited to discussions about Isabella's care or brief, charged moments that left me confused about the strange tension building between us. Tonight was my weekly day off, the one concession I'd insisted upon when taking the job. I'd spent the afternoon with Jen in her new apartment, marveling at how quickly our lives had diverged. Her place in Riverfront was sleek and modern, with amenities my old apartment building hadn't even dreamed of offering. "You look different," Jen had observed over wine, "more polished, like you belong in his world now." I'd laughed it off, but later, as my driver took me back to the mansion, Salvatore had insisted on transportation, even on my day off. I found myself studying my reflection in the car window. My hair was styled in a way I'd never managed before. My clothes were designer brands I'd previously only seen in magazines, and there was a confidence in my posture that hadn't existed a month ago. The car slowed as we approached the mansion gates, the security scan completing automatically. Something felt different tonight. More vehicles than usual parked in the circular drive, lights blazing from windows that typically remained dark. "What's happening?" I asked the driver. "Mr. Russo has associates visiting," he replied, his tone neutral. "You might want to enter through the side entrance." The suggestion wasn't subtle. Stay out of sight, away from Salvatore's business guests. I'd planned to go straight to my room anyway, tired from the day out and looking forward to a hot bath in my luxurious private bathroom. Still, curiosity prickled as I slipped through the side door, noting the increased security presence throughout the house. I'd nearly reached the staircase when I heard Isabella's voice, high and distressed, coming from Salvatore's study, a room she was rarely allowed to enter. "But Papa, she promised to read me the next chapter tonight." "Isabella." Salvatore's voice was gentle but firm. "I've explained that Eleanor has the evening to herself. You'll see her in the morning. It's not fair. She's been gone all day." I hesitated, torn between respecting Salvatore's authority and comforting the clearly upset child who had become so important to me. Before I could decide, the study door opened, and Isabella burst out, nearly colliding with me in the hallway. "Eleanor!" Her face lit up, arms wrapping around my waist. "You came back early." "I'm right on schedule, actually," I said, smoothing her hair. "What's got you so upset, sweetheart?" Salvatore appeared in the doorway behind her, and I felt my breath catch. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit with a burgundy tie, his hair combed back, the scar along his jaw somehow more pronounced in the hallway's lighting. He looked formidable, powerful, and irritated at the interruption. "Isabella," he said, his tone warning. "I told you Eleanor needs her privacy on her day off." "It's okay," I assured him, surprising myself with how easily I now contradicted the man who had once terrified me. "I don't mind reading her a chapter before bed." His eyes narrowed slightly, but before he could respond, a voice called from within the study. Deep, male, with a heavy accent. "Salvatore, we need to conclude this discussion. Time is pressing." Isabella's grip on me tightened. I'd never seen her afraid before, but something about that voice clearly unsettled her. Salvatore noticed too. His expression softened as he knelt to Isabella's eye level. "Go with Eleanor, piccola mia. I'll come say goodnight when I'm finished." She nodded, pressing closer to me. As Salvatore straightened, our eyes met over her head, and something passed between us. Concern for Isabella, yes, but something more complex too. "Your guests," I began quietly. "Will be gone soon," he finished, his voice equally low. "Take her upstairs, please." It wasn't until we reached Isabella's room that I felt her relax, her small body no longer rigid with tension. "I don't like Uncle Victor," she confided, as I helped her into pajamas. "He smells like cigars and looks at me funny." "Is that who's visiting your father?" I asked casually, trying not to sound too interested. She nodded, climbing into her canopy bed. "Him and some other men. They come sometimes, and Papa always makes me stay upstairs when they're here." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Sophia says they're business partners, but I heard Marco tell Carlos they're from the old country and very dangerous." Marco was Salvatore's head of security, Carlos his second in command. The fact that they'd discussed such things where Isabella might overhear troubled me. "Well, your father would never let anyone dangerous near you," I assured her, pulling her favorite book from the nightstand. Now, where did we leave off? Was the princess about to enter the enchanted forest? She settled against her pillows, her earlier distress forgotten as I began reading. By the 3rd page, her eyelids were drooping. By the 5th, she was asleep. I marked our place and tucked the blankets around her, brushing a kiss across her forehead, a gesture that had become natural over the weeks. As I turned to leave, I found Salvatore standing in the doorway, watching us with an unreadable expression. "She was exhausted," I whispered, moving past him into the hallway. He closed Isabella's door quietly, then remained standing closer than was strictly necessary, his cologne enveloping me, sandalwood, and something else I could never quite identify. "You didn't have to come back tonight," he said. "Your contract guarantees you a full 24 hours. "I wanted to come home," I replied, the word home slipping out before I could catch it. Besides, she was expecting me for her bedtime story. Something flickered in his eyes at my use of home. "You've been good for her," he said after a moment. "She's more balanced with you here, less anxious." "Children need consistency," I said. "Something I imagine is difficult in your line of work." His jaw tightened. "Isabella has everything she needs." "Except normalcy," I countered. "She overheard your security men talking about your dangerous visitors tonight." Anger flashed across his features. "Who?" "That's not the point, Salvatore. The point is she's absorbing more than you realize about your world. She's afraid of your associate, Victor?" "Though she can't articulate why, she should be afraid of him," he muttered, then shook his head. "I'll speak with Marco about discretion around Isabella." I nodded, suddenly aware of how tired I was. I should get to bed too. "Wait." His hand caught my arm, the touch sending warmth through me despite the thin fabric of my blouse. "I need to discuss something with you. Come to my study after I've concluded this meeting." "Is everything okay?" "Isabella's health is fine," he assured me. "This is about other matters. Give me 30 minutes. The request, or command, with Salvatore it was hard to distinguish, left me curious and uneasy. In the 3 weeks I'd worked for him, he'd never summoned me to his study late at night. In my room, I changed from my day clothes into more comfortable attire, leggings and an oversized sweater that had somehow survived Natalia's wardrobe purges. I checked Isabella one more time, finding her still peacefully asleep, then made my way back downstairs. The mansion was quiet now, the visitors apparently gone. I knocked softly on the study door. "Enter," Salvatore called. He stood by the fireplace, jacket removed, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal powerful forearms, and the edge of what I now knew was a family crest tattooed on his right wrist. He'd loosened his tie and held a glass of what looked like whiskey, his posture suggesting fatigue beneath the ever-present authority. "You wanted to see me?" I said, remaining near the door. "Sit, please." He gestured to the leather sofa near the fire rather than the formal chairs before his desk, a more intimate setting that made my pulse quicken slightly. I perched on the edge of the sofa. He remained standing, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I'll be traveling to Italy next week," he said without preamble. "Business that can't be handled remotely. I'll be gone approximately 10 days. I nodded, uncertain why this required a private meeting. He'd traveled twice already during my employment, though never for so long. "I want you and Isabella to come with me," he continued, watching my reaction closely. "To Italy?" I blinked in surprise. "But her school, her routine..." "Arrangements have been made with her teachers. The villa has secure grounds where her routine can continue relatively undisturbed." He set down his glass. "She's never seen her ancestral home. I think it's time. And you need me because of her diabetes management," I concluded. "That's one reason," he agreed, his eyes never leaving mine. "But not the only one." Something in his tone made my heartbeat accelerate. "What are the others?" He moved to sit beside me on the sofa, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Isabella trusts you completely. Having you there will make the transition easier for her." "And?" I prompted, sensing he was holding something back. He was silent for a moment, studying me with that penetrating gaze that always made me feel like he could see straight through my defenses. "The men who were here tonight represent certain traditional elements in my organization," he said finally. "They have specific ideas about family succession, appearances, proper roles. They're pressuring me to formalize arrangements they believe are overdue." I frowned, not following. "What kind of arrangements?" "A marriage alliance," he said bluntly, "with the daughter of an associate in Sicily. It would strengthen certain business ties and satisfy traditional expectations." The revelation hit me with unexpected force, a hollow feeling opening in my stomach. "Oh," was all I managed. "I have no interest in their arrangement," he continued, his voice hardening, "but appearances matter in my position. Bringing you and Isabella, presenting us as a family unit, sends a message that would end these discussions permanently." I stood abruptly, needing distance from his overwhelming presence. "You want me to pretend to be, what, exactly? Your girlfriend? Your wife?" "I want you to be exactly what you are, an intelligent, capable woman who cares for my daughter and has earned my trust." He rose as well, moving to stand before me. "The rest, they will assume based on your presence at my side. Using me as a shield against an unwanted marriage," I clarified, unexpected hurt making my tone sharper than intended. His expression darkened. "Is that how you see it?" "How else should I see it? Perhaps as an opportunity," he countered. "To see Italy, to experience the culture, to further solidify your position in Isabella's life. Or perhaps as a step further into a world I never intended to enter," I replied. "When I agreed to care for Isabella's health, I didn't sign up to be paraded as your whatever they'll assume I am." He stepped closer, until barely inches separated us. "And what would be so objectionable about those assumptions, Eleanor?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us had dared voice during these weeks of growing tension. My heart hammered against my ribs as I forced myself to meet his gaze. "Nothing," I admitted quietly. "Except that they wouldn't be true, wouldn't they?" His voice had dropped to nearly a whisper. "Are you certain?" I wasn't certain. Not at all. Somewhere between fearing this man and working in his home, between caring for his daughter and observing his complex nature, something had shifted. The magnetic pull I'd felt from the beginning had transformed into something deeper, an understanding, a connection I couldn't easily define. "I don't know what game you're playing," I said finally. "No game. His hand rose to my face, fingers brushing my cheek with surprising gentleness. Only truth, Eleanor. Since the night you found Isabella, you've seen parts of me no one else has been allowed to see. The father beyond the reputation. The man beneath the power. I've seen a man who lives in constant vigilance, I countered. Who surrounds himself with guards and weapons, and never lets his guard down. Until now, he said softly. Until you. Before I could respond, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked it with a frown, then stepped back. The intimate moment shattered. Security alert, he explained tersely. Wait here. He strode from the study, leaving me breathless and confused. Through the open door, I could hear terse commands being given, footsteps moving rapidly across marble floors. Something was happening. Something that had transformed Salvatore from the almost vulnerable man of moments ago back to the hardened figure I'd first encountered. Against my better judgment, I moved to the doorway, peering into the foyer where Salvatore stood surrounded by security personnel. Their voices were low, but I caught fragments. Perimeter breach, southeast corner, armed. Fear gripped me. Isabella was upstairs, sleeping peacefully, unaware of whatever threat had triggered this response. I turned, intending to go to her, when Salvatore's voice rang out. Eleanor, stay exactly where you are. He crossed to me in 4 long strides, his expression grim. We have unwelcome visitors. Marco is handling it, but I need you to stay in this room until I say otherwise. Isabella. Has Sophia with her? He finished. 2 more men are stationed outside her door. She's secure. What's happening? I demanded, fear making my voice shake. A message is being delivered, he replied cryptically. One I should have anticipated after today's meeting. Understanding dawned. This is related to your visitors, the marriage alliance you rejected? His jaw tightened. Some people don't accept no for an answer. From somewhere outside came the sound of what might have been a muffled gunshot. I flinched, but Salvatore's expression didn't change. Stay here, he repeated, more forcefully this time. Lock the door behind me. Open it only for me or Marco. Before I could respond, he pulled a small handgun from beneath his shirt, a weapon I hadn't realized he was carrying, and checked it with practiced efficiency. Salvatore, I began, panic rising. It will be fine, he assured me, his voice gentling despite the steel in his eyes. This is business as usual. Nothing I haven't handled before. The casual way he referred to armed intruders as business as usual should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself reaching for his free hand, squeezing it tightly. Be careful, I whispered. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise perhaps at my concern. Then he leaned forward, pressing his lips briefly, fiercely against mine. Before I could react, he was gone, pulling the door closed behind him. I locked it with trembling hands, then sank onto the sofa, mind racing. The kiss had been so quick, so unexpected, yet it had sent electricity coursing through me. But there was no time to process that now. Not with whatever danger lurked outside. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Occasionally, I heard voices or movement, but nothing that revealed what was happening. I checked my phone for any messages from Sophia about Isabella, but the screen remained blank. Finally, a soft knock at the door made me jump. Eleanor, Salvatore's voice called. It's me. I unlocked the door with shaking fingers. He stood alone in the hallway, his white shirt now stained with what looked disturbingly like blood spatter. The gun was gone, but his expression remained hard, his eyes cold in a way I hadn't seen before. Are you hurt? I gasped, reaching toward the stains. Not my blood, he said quietly, catching my hand before I could touch him. The situation is contained. Isabella is still sleeping. You're safe. The simple declaration, you're safe, carried weight beyond the obvious. It wasn't just physical safety he was assuring me of, but something deeper, a promise. What happened? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Victor's associates attempted to deliver a message. His jaw clenched. I replied more emphatically. The clinical way he described what had clearly been violence should have repulsed me. Instead, I found myself understanding on some primal level. He had protected his home, his daughter, me. They won't return? I asked. No. The single word carried finality. But this confirms we should leave for Italy sooner rather than later. We'll go tomorrow. Tomorrow? I echoed. But I'm not prepared. I need to. Everything you need will be provided. He cut me off. Pack whatever personal items you value. The rest can be purchased in Milan. The high-handed manner would have irritated me weeks ago. Now I recognized it as his response to perceived threat. Taking control, eliminating variables, protecting what was his. And somehow, I had become included in that category. I need to shower, he said, glancing down at his stained shirt with distaste. Then we'll talk further. He turned to go, but I caught his arm. Salvatore, the kiss, was overdue, he finished, his expression softening slightly. But perhaps poorly timed. Perhaps, I agreed, a small smile escaping despite the tension of the moment. He studied me for a long moment. 3 weeks ago, you were terrified of me. I still am sometimes, I admitted. But I've seen more now. The father who reads bedtime stories. The man who remembers how I take my coffee. The protector who would do anything to keep his daughter safe. And you? He asked, his voice dropping. Would I do anything to keep you safe as well? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. 3 weeks ago, I would have assumed he saw me as an employee, useful for Isabella's care, but ultimately expendable. Now, looking into his eyes, I saw something else entirely, something possessive, fierce, and undeniably genuine. Yes, I whispered, I think you would. His hand rose to cup my cheek, thumb tracing my lower lip. Come to Italy, Eleanor. Not as my shield or my employee, as something more. What exactly? I pressed, needing clarity despite the hypnotic effect of his touch. Mine, he said simply. In whatever way you're willing to be. The possessiveness of the word should have offended my independent nature. Instead, it sent warmth coursing through me. Not submission, but belonging. A mutual claiming. I need to check on Isabella first, I said, not quite answering. And you need that shower. A faint smile touched his lips. Practical as always. One of us needs to be, I replied, matching his smile with my own. Dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as our private jet lifted off from Chicago. Isabella slept peacefully across from us, exhausted from the whirlwind of preparation for our sudden departure. Sophia sat further back, maintaining a discreet distance while never taking her eyes off her charge. Beside me, Salvatore worked quietly on his tablet, occasionally making calls in rapid Italian. The events of the night before seemed to have been compartmentalized. Violence tucked away, business continuing, plans advancing. Yet something fundamental had changed between us. His hand rested casually on mine during takeoff, his body angled protectively toward me when the flight attendant approached, his eyes finding mine with newfound openness. You never actually said yes, he observed quietly, after ending a call. To Italy? I'm on the plane, aren't I? To being mine, he clarified, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I looked at Isabella, sleeping peacefully with complete trust in her father's ability to keep her safe. I thought of the blood on his shirt last night, the unseen violence he was capable of, the dangerous world he inhabited. I thought of the gentle way he brushed his daughter's hair from her forehead, the respect with which he'd treated my boundaries despite his habitual command of everything around him. Your world frightens me, I admitted. The violence, the constant vigilance, the enemies lurking in shadows. His expression tightened. I understand but you don't frighten me anymore, I continued, cutting him off. Neither does the idea of being yours. What scares me is how quickly that became something I wanted. His eyes darkened with an emotion I was only beginning to recognize. And now? Now I'm flying to Italy with the most dangerous man I've ever met, I said, turning my hand beneath his so our palms pressed together. A man I've watched murder for his daughter's safety, A man who kisses like he's claiming territory. And yet you're still here, he observed, fingers interlacing with mine. Yes, I agreed softly. I'm still here. Isabella stirred across from us, her eyes blinking open sleepily. Are we in Italy yet? She mumbled. Not yet, piccola mia, Salvatore answered, his tone gentle. Many hours still to fly. She yawned, gaze moving between us, settling on our clasped hands. A smile bloomed across her face. Knowing, pleased, unsurprised. I told Sophia you were going to be my new mama, she announced with a child's directness. She said I shouldn't say that, but I knew. Papa looks at you the way Prince Charming looks at Cinderella in my book. Heat rushed to my cheeks as Salvatore chuckled beside me, a rich, genuine sound I'd rarely heard from him. Isabella, he admonished gently. Remember our discussion about patience? She sighed dramatically. Good things come to those who wait, she recited. But Papa, I've been waiting forever for you to kiss Eleanor. This time, my blush was matched by a rare hint of color on Salvatore's cheeks. Behind us, Sophia suppressed what sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Perhaps we should discuss this later, he suggested, but his hand remained firmly entwined with mine. Isabella shrugged, already distracted by the tablet Salvatore handed her with her favorite games. As she settled back into her seat, her diabetes monitor beeped softly. Time for a check, I said, reaching for her testing kit with my free hand. Salvatore watched as I performed the now familiar routine, checking Isabella's levels, adjusting her insulin pump, noting the numbers in the tracking app. His eyes held something I'd never seen there before. Not just approval or gratitude, but something deeper. Something like peace. You see why I need you both in Italy, he said quietly, as Isabella returned to her game. This, what we are becoming, is worth protecting. Worth changing for. The implication wasn't lost on me. The criminal empire, the violence, the dangerous associates, all aspects of a life he was suggesting might evolve for the sake of what was growing between us. One step at a time, I cautioned. Italy first, then we'll see about restructuring your entire existence. He laughed again, the sound warming me from within. As I said, practical. As the plane carried us across the Atlantic, Isabella fell back asleep, and Salvatore eventually dozed beside me, his head tilting onto my shoulder in a rare display of vulnerability. I watched the sunrise from 40,000 feet, marveling at the journey that had brought me here. 1 month ago, I'd been a waitress struggling to make rent, dreaming of a nursing career that seemed forever just beyond reach. Now I was flying to Italy beside a man whose world I'd entered through an act of simple kindness, finding a lost child on a dark street, the dangerous favor that had changed everything. Salvatore stirred beside me, his eyes opening to find mine already watching him. Without a word, he raised our still clasped hands and pressed a kiss against my wrist, just over my pulse. No regrets, he murmured. I thought of all I'd left behind. The diner, the cramped apartment, the exhaustion of constant financial struggle. And all I'd gained, not just material comfort, but purpose, connection, and this complicated, dangerous man who looked at me like I was something precious to be protected at all costs. No regrets, I answered, and sealed the promise with a kiss. Whatever awaited us in Italy, whatever future we would build from this unlikely beginning, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. In the orbit of Salvatore Russo, no longer afraid of his gravity, but surrendering willingly to its pull,